Good evening and welcome to another edition of Parent Chat. I'm Chris,
And I'm Kim.
and tonight we're talking about love languages. We're continuing our discussion that we've had over the last few weeks, and today we're going to start and really dig into the first of 5 languages.
Yep.
Where have we been? Well, we talked about the biblical foundation for marriage, set up a framework for that within the constructs of God's design. And last week, right, we spoke about love languages just in general.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about how Gary Chapman, who has written the books and the Bible studies, he started this, I believe, with just marriage.
Yeah,
right?
That was the first one.
But it really extends to everybody, all relationships. Because relationships are about people.
Exactly.
And what he has seen in his practice, he's a counselor or whatever, is that people speak these different languages. That's what he calls them. And we looked briefly at the 5 that he's identified. And that's words of affirmation, physical touch, shopping, gifts, gifts, acts of service, and what's the 5th one? You're right. The other 5th, the quality time.
Quality time, yeah.
Quality time. And so we looked at all of those. We looked at how within a marriage we have individuality, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we looked at a few Bible verses that kind of talked about that. A spiritual gift is given to each one of us so that we can help each other. All of you together are Christ's body, and each of you is a part of it. And so the point of that, too, was even within a marriage, there is this identity, this self-identity still. But we are a union. As we look at other relationships like parent-child or peer and any other ones, there's still a individual component, but there's that relationship, and that's what we're really driving at. How do we serve others through this relationship? And really the undercurrent of that is how do we bring the gospel to people? And we do that not only through our proclamation, but through serving, through the relationships. So, this study, although it is kind of focused on marriage and couples, there is a lot in here that is not, that is generalized.
Oh, yeah.
We've used it with our children all through their continued lives. I find a use for it at work in the secular world, and so I hope that you will find value in this regardless of your situation,
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
All right. So last week, look at that, there they are, all 5 of them.
Oh, see. Just have to turn the page.
And turn the page. So last week we talked about what happens after marriage, right? We talked about being in love and then this real love. And the transformation is probably the wrong word, but maybe what would be the right word? Yeah, I know. So, where we see that like being in love is maybe a temporary high. It's maybe superficial. You may not need necessarily these love languages because it just is working.
Yeah, well, when you're feeling that in love, you tend to, we talked about that last week, you tend to just kind of exhibit all of them.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly. And then your relationship continues to grow, continues to mature, and you start to, I guess, transform. I'm just going to use the word transform, I guess, from being in love to really having this real love. And this real love is something that really unites reason and emotion, we talked about. It's the kind of love where it's emotional in nature, but not obsession.
Yeah.
It recognizes personal growth.
Okay.
And so we spent time talking about it. We're not going to continue.
Yeah.
But that's where we ended, really. And then the last thing we spoke about was pointed you to the website, asked you to take the test.
Mm-hmm.
Hope you all have taken the test and have received your scores. And really it's more, it kind of shows you which one of these gifts is more prominent in your, not life, but in your personality.
Yeah.
Than the others. It kind of weights them. And we also invited you to bring your spouse or significant other with you so that we can continue this discussion. It just makes more sense. We're talking about relationships, so it makes more sense to have both of you together.
Absolutely.
All right, so love languages. Tonight we're talking about words of affirmation.
Excellent.
So, what are words of affirmation? How would you define that?
Words of affirmation are when you are saying anything positive about the other person.
Yeah.
Thanking them for what they're doing, or just showing them appreciation, or you look nice, or
Yeah,
things like that.
exactly. Right, yeah. I mean, it's... The titles of these are pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Self-explanatory. But when you really start digging into them, there's nuances in there that are definitely worth talking
absolutely.
about. And so, you're absolutely right. Words of affirmation. You always hear that saying, actions speak louder than words. If your love language, if your primary love language is words of affirmation, that's really not true.
Nope.
Words speak loud.
Mm-hmm.
Words might even be everything.
Exactly.
Especially if you find that your love languages are heavy on the words of affirmation and very low on like gifts or acts of service. It may be, prominent language in your life. It's something that maybe you would place a lot of importance on. And you mentioned some things, but, some sayings, I love you, I'm thankful for,
Mm-hmm.
are things that will go a long way in communicating how much you're appreciated.
Well, it's not just about appreciation. It's about just showing that you're being thought of. That you're, that you love. So, I mean, it's not just appreciation. It's not just the thank yous and the...
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And in fact, did you know that the words of affirmation, according to Gary, is the most prominent, popular love language?
Huh.
Which kind of makes sense, I guess. I mean, let's stick to the thank yous and appreciations. We're always taught to say thank you, right? And so we're always taught to use, to be nice. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So, I mean, I could see that. Maybe intuitively in our culture, we recognize that even at a subconscious level.
Sure.
But you're right. I mean, it is important, these words of affirmation, but it's not strictly a matter of appreciation, right?
Right.
It can be other things. We're going to talk about that. There's 3 that he identifies. And one thing I'd like to mention too is that it's the only love language that revolves around verbal expression. And if you look at the other 4, they don't.
You're right.
This is the only one that is spoken. The rest of them are active.
Huh.
This is active too, but right.
Well, yeah, but...
So some examples too, besides the I love you and the thank you, are, and we'll kind of dive into this a little bit more, but just to hint at it, things like notes. Leaving little notes here and there for somebody who is, whose love language is words of affirmation, the prominent one. That goes a long way.
Yes, it does. I still have all of them.
All of what, dear?
Well, all the little notes that you've left for me.
Do you want to explain? Or is that good enough?
That's good enough.
Okay.
No, I mean, words of affirmation has always been one of my prominent. And back when you had to leave the house.
Right, when I could.
When you could leave the house. For the last however many years since we've done this. Every once in a while, I'll open up my computer in the morning and there'll be a note sitting in there. And it usually just says hi, or I love you, or it's just something simple, but it's those things, that's why I'm saying it doesn't have to be a thank you or an I appreciate you. It's a, just to know that you are thinking of me.
Yeah, exactly. And it comes in so many different forms, right? It is verbal, but it's also written, which is verbal, in that
exactly.
sense.
But see, really, those notes get dual purpose because those handwritten notes can also, we can talk about those under receiving gifts.
Sure, but I can't just take all those notes and give them to you on your birthday.
No.
Okay, so. All right. So yes, I hear you. So words of affirmation. What is it? Blah blah blah. We talked about that. How do you know if words of affirmation are one of your more prominent love languages? And I would say you should take the test. It's a very good test. 30 some questions. Takes 5 minutes. It was nothing. But, you may also say, well, sure, I can take the test for myself, but what about my spouse? He, she would never bother with it. And that's fine. So there is a list that I kind of pieced together that might help you identify if the target has that as a prominent language. Okay. They tend to be people, or this person should be, or could be a person who notice and cares about the details of other people's lives. For instance, they might be the first one to notice the partner's new haircut. Okay. They might remember to ask the cashier how their child is feeling, because the last time they were there 2 weeks ago, the cashier said that the child was sick or something. They might ask, they're always going to make sure that they ask the neighbor if the dog is okay. So they're really conscious of these types of details. Really, really focused in on people's lives. They get a thrill from receiving compliments.
Absolutely.
That's a giveaway. And they feel like, they're happy when others appreciate having them in their lives. And they'll say that, right? I really appreciate you being in my life. They love feeling understood, receiving recognition for a job well done. You can see the trend here, right? They appreciate, and this is what I found, and we talked about this in the first week, but it's one of those things that just keeps coming back over and over again, at least for me, maybe because I'm a slow learner. You tend to, your primary love language tends to be the one that you apply to someone else.
Sure.
If your primary love language is gifts, you tend to buy gifts for other people, unless you're cognizant of what's going on. And so, when you start going through this list, that's exactly what you see. Are these people, the person that you have in mind, if they're the ones that are always, looking at the details, finding out if you're okay, encouraging you or whatever it is, chances are that's their love language.
That makes sense.
Yeah, they're encouragers. And the last point I have here is bolded. That's why I was reading it, because I wanted to know why I made it bold. But I already told you. It's because they're hoping that you can do the same for them. That's their love language. They're asking you, and they're telling you what they need. They don't realize it. But we'll go through this whole list, for each week we'll talk about a different love language, and you'll see it's the same thing. And chances are, if you look at how you react to other people in your relationships, chances are that's your love language, right? I mean, it's...
Yeah.
So. I wanted to give you a story. This is a story from the book, from Gary's book, and he talks about this wife that comes into his office, and he offers her free advice.
Okay.
So I'll butcher the story, but I just didn't want to read it. But I'll get the core of it. She comes in and she complains to him that her husband will not paint the bathroom. He has said he would. It has been months and months, and she has asked him repeatedly. And in fact, one summer day, it was a perfect day to paint. And he was on his computer cleaning out old files. And she confronted him and said, "Why are you doing this? It's a great day to paint." And he gave some excuse, whatever it was. And so she's explaining this to Gary, and she says, "What do I do? How do I get him to paint?" He knows it has to be done.
Yeah.
And so, Gary asks her a few questions. One, does he know? And she's like, "Yeah, he knows. I've told him many times." And he said, "Here, you want some advice? Here's what I would tell you to do. Never bring it up again. Instead, what you do is, when he takes out the garbage, compliment him on that. Thank you. I know that you do it all the time, but thank you. When he pays the electrical bill, thank him. Many husbands don't do that," he tells her. Thank him for doing it. That she doesn't have to, because he took care of it. And obviously be sincere. And she comes back a few weeks later, and she said that her bathroom was painted. Why?
Well, because instead of nagging, she was appreciating all the things that he did, instead of nagging him about the things that he wasn't getting done.
Yeah, and what happened to his love tank?
No.
Right? It got filled.
Mm-hmm.
And when it got filled, when it was filled, one of the results of that is more of a drive to fill somebody else's, to fill his wife's tank.
Yeah.
It's a response to what's being done for him. And it's a I would dare say a natural response. And that's what that's what we're talking about. Not being manipulative.
No.
But it's responding to his needs, right? Or her needs, whatever it is. He was, in this case, was not feeling appreciated.
Right.
Right? His primary language clearly was words of affirmation. And his tank was empty.
Exactly.
So, filled it up. And he painted it. We've never had that.
Moving on.
Okay. All right. So at the beginning of this, we talked about words of affirmation, being appreciative.
Yeah.
And you said there's more to it than that.
Yes.
Can you name a couple more?
Well, you can, be encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely right.
You know, when someone's having a tough day, when someone's struggling to get something done, you know, not like a cheerleader, because trust me, that can get annoying. But just, you know, just encourage, or just sit and listen.
That one's a tough one. There is no listening love language. I keep checking that. It's quality time and acts of service.
That's definitely an act of
That's
service.
definitely an act of service. Yeah, absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
So you have these encouraging words. You have kind words,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Listening words, you know, where you're listening, and humble, right? Being humble, and you know, it really, I guess it all comes down to is just being in the moment, understanding what is going on in that person's life at that immediate moment, and really understanding what they need, right? They're feeling frustrated. Like you said, the worst you can do is be the cheerleader.
Exactly.
But you can be frustrated along with them, right? I feel your pain. That has to be very difficult, and it's not working.
Yeah.
And those are all words of affirmation. And so, well, there's something in there
Oh.
that I found funny, but I kept seeing it over and over and over again, so I wrote it down, because it's like, okay. So we have different types of words of affirmation.
Yeah.
Right? Encourage, kind, humble. These are all things. It doesn't have to be the I love you. And like,
Or the constant thank you, thank you, thank you.
right. Yeah, or the constant thank you, thank you, thank you. Exactly. And so, what can it be? Right? And, you know, we've talked about some of these. Be authentic, be empathetic, show your appreciation, the I love you notes, mail a letter, give them a shout out. That must be a social media thing.
Yes. It is.
Point out their strengths. Oh, here it is. Make a habit. Make it a habit. Right? It's not a one and done.
Oh, no, not at all.
And this is what I found funny, but it's not funny. I mean, it really isn't. It's make a notebook. If you find that your significant other, your spouse or whoever, your child, whatever it is, this is their primary love language, words of affirmation, and you just cannot come up with the words that quick when you need them the most. Many sites, many resources recommend carrying around a notebook.
Okay.
And you can, as you think of a thought, like, you know, my wife, you know, cooks dinner or does the bills, and she gets frustrated. Okay, you don't, by the way. And
I don't cook dinner or pay bills, or I don't get frustrated.
And so, I can't think of what to say, but I know it's going to happen. And so, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to think about it ahead of time or a different time. These are some of the statements I might make.
Oh, yeah.
Write them down, and you have them in your notebook.
Yeah.
We're going to get to this whole communication thing in a second.
Okay.
And it's going to make or break that. And where I'm going with that is, if you find that writing these things down is helpful to you to communicate to your spouse and your spouse is laughing at you for doing it, it kind of ruins things. So it's a two-way, you know, you have to acknowledge what the other person is doing, that they really are there to, yeah. So, all right. So those are things you can do. What about things you shouldn't do? I have a whole bunch of those.
Oh, wow.
Quite a bit.
Yep.
So, one of them, don't assume that there is a perfect quote in life for every situation.
Oh, yeah, don't do that.
There isn't.
Just talk.
Or not talk.
Or not talk.
Right? Just being there, sure, is quality time. But it's also words of affirmation because it shows support.
Well, and I think we're going to see as we go through these that there are quite a few things that could fall into several of these different love languages.
Very good point. You're right. Absolutely. And to that end, too, many people, I would argue all people, are multilingual. And so your love language, your primary may be words of affirmation, but right underneath it might be quality time or something.
Exactly.
So, or physical touch, and just, you know, putting your hand on your shoulder, holding your hands and saying, I really appreciate you, what you've done. You're speaking multiple languages. So you're right.
Exactly.
All right, don't flatter. Words of affirmation, not a checkbox.
No.
We don't get to put reminders on our phones saying,
Don't forget.
don't forget. Good job, honey. I had a
However, when your wife checks off everything on her to-do list, then you can be like, awesome.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Right?
Especially if
Absolutely.
your wife loves to-do lists.
Especially, do you know anyone like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a to-do list.
No.
It's
No,
it's
can't.
not. There's not a quota. I am going to provide to you 32 instances of words of affirmation in 255 characters or less each time over the course of a 8-hour period. It just doesn't work like that.
No.
Don't try to take shortcuts in expressing your love.
Oh yeah, because it's obvious.
It is.
It's so obvious. Don't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, make sure it's sincere. Because you're right, we can tell.
Oh yeah.
You know, you can tell, everyone can tell. And all of these, right? If I'm going to spend quality time with you and I'm less like, come on, you might as well not do it.
Exactly.
It's just, it's no different than arguing with someone. It's really emptying out that love tank.
Exactly.
The next few are really interesting. I hadn't thought of it. But if your love language is primarily words of affirmation, your loved one should be careful about the words that they use. Because something like teasing is going to land on you harder than someone whose primary love language is not that. They're more sensitive, which makes to the words, which makes sense. That's their love language. That's what they associate love with. And so be careful, because being mean and hurtful, they're going to take them to heart more than somebody who has this as a lower level love language. Don't make fun of them or tease them too much, right? I mean, because they're gonna, it's gonna affect them. They're going to take it to heart. They're sensitive. Don't be overly critical, or condescending. They interpret that as being dumb. You're calling them dumb. And this one too, don't withhold kind words as punishment. And how important that is in any relationship.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, even in the midst of a dispute or a relationship that is stressed, you owe it to the other person to give them words that they deserve. I may be angry at you, but you did do this, blah, blah, blah. That's super tough.
Yep.
And maybe nearly impossible for someone like me. But we try. I try. But yeah, right? I mean, and don't try to manipulate them, which goes back to the story, right?
Exactly.
You want the bathroom painted, I get it. But that's a response to your relationship. That sounds weird, but you know where I'm going with it.
Well, because when I feel loved, I'm more likely to show that love to others. You know, it's really hard when both people have drained love tanks.
Mm-hmm.
Then you really have to push through to show that love, even though you're not really feeling it.
Right.
And that's important to do too, and because that does happen.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, what you do should be out of a response for the love, not
Right.
because you're being manipulated
Right.
into it.
Right. And really, you know, when you look at the big scheme of things, a painted bathroom is not really that critical in relation to your marriage, your relationship with your children.
Mm-hmm.
And so ensuring, and we've talked about this even before this series started, ensuring that you have the right goal, the right vision in mind, and that is post-earth, that is post-life, then it really is less important. And what you're focused on is Christ, is serving. And so with that in mind, understanding the needs of others and meeting those needs is far more important. And the results you get are far more important. And by the way, you'll get your bathroom painted too. Right? Yeah, so those are the things that I thought of and I found to avoid. So how do we lay this right foundation? How do we set the stage for words of affirmation? I don't know either.
Well, I think you do.
I do. One of the things is we talked about make a habit, but make a habit of intentionally looking for those opportunities. Finding times and ways that you can express your appreciation, your encouragement, your empathy, whatever it is, to that person. Be intentional. Marriage, relationships are not easy. Real ones are hard, and it takes work. This is the work. Serving others is the work, and this is one way to do it. So, no shortcuts.
Nope.
Look for opportunities. Once you've identified this is their primary love language, then now the ball's in your court. And now you have to continually fill their tank.
Well, and you had talked about, using negative words affect that person even more. But if you look for ways to encourage them and to reaffirm them, and you're doing that routinely and sincerely, that when something does come up, that you have to talk about that may be negative in nature, it is a lot easier.
Because they're full?
Well,
I mean, are you extracting some of that?
Well, partly because they're full, but mostly because, I know that this is coming from a sincere place. That this isn't, that generally you're seeing the good things. So if something does come up, then it's like, oh, okay, well then I'm going to listen. And
I see.
Is there something that we need to work through?
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point. Because there are always things that we need to work through in any relationship. And being able to sit down and say, when you do this, this is how it negatively affects me, the family, the finances, the whatever. That is a much easier conversation to have.
Yeah.
When it's built on a foundation of trust and
sincerity and love and
yeah, very good point. Make a point of noticing the good things in life every day and share these thoughts with your significant other.
The things that you say, the words of affirmation, the really just being positive in nature, not just positive about, like, if you're sitting there going, oh, you look beautiful, thank you for cooking dinner tonight, and then you turn and everything else is a complaint that's coming out of your mouth.
Yeah.
It's like, was that sincere?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. It's, and again, we keep going back to, the real foundation, and that is God and these relationships and marriage, but also outside of marriage, the peers and families. It's bigger than a few comments.
Mm-hmm.
A few comments are tactical. It's what you can do as an example of serving.
Exactly.
Of serving others. I like the next one. When you do, and I think you said this, I'm going to word it a teeny bit differently, is to add specific details. And I learned that in my career. You could sit somebody down and say, good job. But if they don't know what you're talking about, and especially if you continually say that all the time, it's going to go in one ear and out the other.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Being
specific, this is what I saw, and this is the positive impact it had on whatever. There you go, come on. Then, it makes it more sincere.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it really shows that you have taken
that you're
effort.
actually paying attention.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
To know that you're actually paying attention to what's going on.
Yeah.
Which goes back to people with words of affirmation tend to be more detail oriented, so they appreciate it when others find the details in what they're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And remembering to ask your spouse how their day went and meaning it and inviting them to talk and just sitting there and listening is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned that early on in my marriage. I remember emptying your love tank quite a bit because we'd come home and you would be talking about something, a problem, something that went wrong, and I'm just chomping at the bit to fix it. I know how to fix it. This is what you need to do. Or I know how to fix it. I'll do this. And that actually did more damage than not talking about it. Mm-hmm. And for me, because I'm not the brightest one, I started asking you if you're venting, if you want me to listen or solve. What do you want me to do? And I even interrupt you.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'd say, stop, don't go any further. Am I listening or am I solving? And you would tell me you're listening. And then I learned to shut my mouth and listen. And it was hard. It's still hard. It was hard. But that's what you needed, right?
Exactly.
And so, and it was okay, and that kind of goes, down a little bit when we talk about this communication, is being open. What are your needs? And being okay with the response that you get. I know you can fix this, but I don't want you to.
Right.
All I want you to do is listen.
Exactly.
Now I'm doing better. I don't ask as much.
No, you don't ask as much.
So.
Pretty impressive.
Well, thank you. All right. Other rules of the road.
Okay.
Okay? Talk. This one is a big one, and we just
It's huge, yeah.
started it. Your partner, your spouse, is not a mind reader.
Nope. I don't care how long you've been married.
Nope.
I don't care how well you know the person.
You don't.
Don't assume that the other person just knows what you're thinking or what you need.
Yep.
You have to talk.
And don't say, and you'll laugh at this, but I've seen this happen. I don't think in our marriage, but I have seen this happen. Don't tell the person what you need, and they get mad when they feel that need. And an example that I found was going to a restaurant.
Okay.
The waiter comes over, says, "What would you like for dinner?" You say, "I would like a salad." The waiter goes back and brings you a salad, and you are disgusted and offended because he should have known that, but he asked you. And it's humorous, but we can think back in times where that's happened.
Yeah.
You know, where, what do you need? I need you to listen. I need more support from you. My love language is words of affirmation. I need you to support me more. And the minute they open their mouth and say, I'm sorry, I do, and by the way, I really think you're a great mother to our children. How dare you? You asked for it. You didn't ask for it, but right?
Yeah.
So there's that responsibility on the other side. If you're going to ask, be willing to accept it. And even if it isn't what you expect, it's the thought that counts. How many times do we tell that to our children in gifts? Right?
Yeah.
Yes, I know you got one already, but you say thank you because it's the thought. They tried. They're trying to fill your love tank. They're trying to serve you, just like God has asked us to serve others. And trust. You'll never get anywhere without that. No.
It's the basis of every relationship.
It's the basis of every relationship. These love languages will do you no good without trust. That's all I have.
That's good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So that is it for tonight. We've spoken of words of affirmation. Again, if you have not gotten Gary's book, do get it. It really is good. It really is good.
Go to the website.
Or go to the website or whatever. Absolutely.
He even has an app.
Yeah, the app is really cool. We were playing around with it the other day.
Yeah.
We can request love tank levels from each other once a day. And I think they do it once a day so that you don't annoy the other person. You can set up little nudges. You can. I mean, it's a fun app. And what's really cool about that is it just gets you talking.
Yeah, exactly.
It just gets you talking.
It's just one more way to talk through these.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and we'll share some other things that we've done through the years with you. Not today, because then you won't come back.
No, you'll get bored if you're in one day.
I don't know. They might get excited. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
All my failures. All right. Next week we will continue our conversation with quality time.
That's a good one too.
That is a good one. Yep. I'm trying to think where mine was. It wasn't that high. I think it was a little bit high.
For me, quality time was second.
And words of affirmation were first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Words of affirmation were first. Mine was physical touch. I like the hand holding and all that stuff. I don't remember what we said.
And you know, it's actually really cool when you have the opposite love languages, because then between the two of you, you're showing and doing all of them.
That's true. That's true.
You know.
Yeah. It's hard. I don't know if it's harder because I don't have anything to compare it to. It's harder when they're like opposite. because they're not languages I know. I had to really learn them. And I had to forget languages that were not important to you.
Right.
You know, and that's tough too. You know, if your love language is gifts, and you're always giving gifts to your spouse, and your spouse's love language is like 0 for gifts, you have to unlearn that. You know, I mean, it might be fun, but it's not doing him or her any good. That sounds harsh, but you know, so that's all. It's just, it's interesting because you start really focusing on the other person and their needs outside of your own needs.
Exactly.
So it's really cool. All right, well, stay with us. We'll end in prayer, and if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, send them our way.
Absolutely.
Shall we pray?
Yep.
Lord, we thank you for this time that we have together. Lord, we thank you for the conversation that we've had tonight. Lord, relationships are so important. Relationships that we have with you and with our spouses and with our children, with our friends, and just with anyone. Lord, it's through these relationships that we bring to others your news, your good news. That we bring to others what you have done for us. Lord, in response to what you've done, we serve, and through serving, we bring people closer to you. Lord, we thank you for the opportunities that you present to us to do that, to serve others. And tonight, Lord, we're focused on words of affirmation. We just ask that you continue to bless our lips, guard our tongue, and help us always speak into the hearts and lives of those around us, even if it isn't their primary language. Help us just encourage and lift up everyone that we come in contact with. Lord, in your name we pray. Amen. Have a good week.